So we had a little bit of a discussion about fall fair stuff, but I thought I'd go through everything I submitted this year and how things placed. So to start with, this is the one thing that didn't place. It was in the sign category that was hand painted. I really like it. It's one of my favorite lettering pieces I've ever done, but I realized that once it was submitted, they were clearly looking for a sign that went in the front of your home. They were all like hello or welcome or scarecrows, but all it specified was a painted sign. So this is what I had submitted. It's one of my favorite pieces, but it wasn't what they wanted. It's an F. Scott Fitzgerald quote, and I absolutely adore this piece. But it was the only submission out of 9 this year that didn't place. Next up, we have my 2 watercolor submissions. So one of these went in pumpkin, went in as a painting, and one of them went in as watercolor. So this one went in the painting category. This is a paint your style from back in the spring. I quite like this one. And it came 3rd. I flipped all the ribbons around just because they name where I live and that's a bit too much information, but I did really enjoy this one. It's one of my favorite paint your styles. I love how the background came out. I love how the palm fronds came out, and I will link to the video that I did it in. The watercolor I submitted was also a paint your style. I love this one. If you've seen the video of this one, you'll know that it was a challenge to do, but it's also a single watercolor paint that I did this entire painting with. It came 3rd. I wasn't super happy with that at the time. I'm just happy now that it placed, and I'm really, really happy that it was the one I decided to submit. I went back and forth. In the pumpkin video, there's actually a section that you can hear me discussing with Mom which one I'm going to submit. And I'm glad I chose this one because it is a great painting. I was really out of my comfort zone. I don't do boats normally, but it was a paint your style, and so it was part of the challenge. Next up, we have the card that literally took me 20 minutes to do the morning of submissions. I had done every other card in the cards category. I'd left this one for last, and I wasn't going to submit, but the person in me that needed everything to be done needed to do this final card. Like, I was getting ready to submit, and I went, okay, if I'm going to submit all the paper crafts but one, why don't I just pull something together for the last one? And it ended up coming in 2nd. I stamped the background paper myself, stamped directly onto the card, background. I stamped the butterflies. This is painted directly onto the paper. I lettered directly onto the paper. It was the easiest card I've ever done, and I am so happy with how it came out. There are definitely going to be more projects like this in the future because it was a project that I didn't overthink it, whereas some of the ones that'll come later, I definitely did overthink. I also loved making my own scrapbooking paper for the background of this because it definitely made it a much easier project than having to cut something perfectly to size, because sometimes card backs aren't cut exactly perfect and then you end up with a wonky background. This is always the hardest card for me. It's the happy anniversary card, and you have to do a handcrafted envelope as well. It came 2nd as well. Last year it was tropical themed. I really liked it. I used the Cricut as a die cut machine. I used Procreate. I designed all my own files. It was a whole lot of work, but it was an awesome card. This year I went much more simple. This is just a single stamp that I embossed with It's charcoal, so it's black with silver shimmer or hollow shimmer. And then I found coordinating paper and found green paper, and I finally got a card baseboard, which made making an envelope far easier than it's been in the past. Normally it's quite a difficult process to create an envelope from scratch, I find, but with an envelope board it is far easier. It was far less painful. I also did a mouse again. I did a mouse last year. It wasn't easy. All these sprinkles are done individually by hand. It takes hours. And I don't think it placed last year. And I was heartbroken. I had spent probably 10 hours on this card last year for it not to place, and so this year I decided to try it again. I went as like traditionally scrapbooky as I could with like a layered paper background. There's a big happy birthday on it, and it came second. So clearly I hit some mark this year that I didn't hit last year, but I was quite happy that this year it placed. Because it is a lot of work for a card. It's definitely not a card that I could ever sell, just the amount of time it takes to individually do each of those sprinkles in shimmer. If I bring it up, you can see. And so it's not a card that I can ever sell. I still have last year's. I didn't end up gifting last year's to anyone. This is the pumpkin. The pumpkin's had its own video. If you've watched it, you've seen how the pumpkin happened. It was fun. I was shocked it came first. There were other pumpkins that it was up against and it still came first. I had fun doing it, but I was definitely shocked with its placing. This was what I knew I wanted to do as soon as I saw that it was an option again this year. Last year's Save the Date was baby dinosaur themed, and I used the Cricut as a die cut machine again. I DIY'd my own file on Procreate. I cut it out of colored watercolor paper. I unlayered it, only for it not to place. Or maybe it came like third. And I was not super happy with that. This year, on the other hand, as soon as I knew that Save the Date was an option, I wanted to use this like fairy house stamp. I've had this stamp for probably 3 years. Have never been able to use it in a project because it is not small. I don't know the actual measurements of it, but it takes up a good amount of paper space, and so I've never actually used it in a project. And so as soon as I knew Save the Date was an option, I went, great. My Save the Date is the fairy house stamp. I did a mock-up of it, and then I did this one. And this one was done probably middle of July. Lots of the other ones I procrastinated for a very long time. This one was done so fast because I knew what I wanted and it came out the way I wanted, and then it came first. And I was really happy because it's one of those things like when the image in your head plays out the way you want it to. This was that project. Finally, we have gift tags. I love doing gift tags. They're one of my favorite projects. Last year's were mason jars. So I did things that end up in our grandparents' mason jars. And so one was a jam jar. One was like a centerpiece for a table that had fairy lights in it, and the other was a bug house that actually had like tiny little caterpillars in it that were so cute. It's so much fun on them. I think they came second last year. This year I did about 7 different mock-ups for gift tags. I had so many different versions of gift tags sitting on various tables in my studio space. These were not one of them. I was on Instagram Live one day about 10 days before the fair when I realized I had to stop procrastinating. Really, if you want to see my I need to stop procrastinating lives, they're over on Instagram when I've got projects that need to happen on a specific timeline and I've just been procrastinating too long. This was one of them, and I planned and executed this all in a live stream. I love them. I need to make a full set of them, and then I need to find somebody who I can put them on gifts for, because I love them. The wings are iridescent. I used ghost colors, so colors that don't really appear on white unless they're on very specific angles. So they're ghost blue wings, they're ever so slightly shimmery. I used a great background stamp from Michaels for the honeycomb pattern. I don't know where the bee stamp is from. I just love it as a set. And it was definitely a lot of fun to put together. So that is how I spent August and July. And that is how I spend August and July every year. If you have a local fall fair, participate. It's so much fun. Yes, it can be a lot of stress, but it is also so much fun. I have fun every year participating. This is this year's pile of entries. So 9 entries, $7 in entry fees, 2 months worth of projects that weren't projects for other things except for the paint your styles. And especially the cards, like, they get me out of my own head because they're not the way I normally do cards. And lots of them have very specific rules on what supplies you can and can't use. So I highly recommend